Good morning and welcome to the Trump Shutdown. I'm Congressman Joe Crowley, the chair of the Democratic Caucus, and I'm joined by many of the members of our Democratic Caucus and leadership of the House Democratic Caucus. Democrats worked tirelessly to avoid this shutdown. Not a single Democrat wanted to see critical federal programs shuttered, their doors, or put our economy at risk. This is not how we ran government when Democrats were in charge. But Republicans struggled in September to keep government doors open. They struggled in December. And yesterday, they failed. They failed the American people. This Trump shutdown certainly could have been avoided. If at any turn, Speaker Ryan or Leader McConnell would have shown just an ounce of leadership, a bit of courage, none of this would have happened today. We wouldn't be here today. If instead of enabling and being complicit in this Trump shutdown by our Republican colleagues, government would be open today. If they had shown half the effort that they did in passing their tax bill, a quarter of the effort in passing a tax bill for the wealthiest 1% in this country and the richest multinational corporations in the history of the world, government would be open today. But Republicans and President Trump have shown they lack the leadership skills, that they have no courage, and probably more importantly, they lack the empathy with struggling Americans today. And that alone is the reason we are shut down, and the middle class Americans and working families are being put at risk. This is the penalty that we pay for the Trump shutdown. And with that, I now turn to the ranking member of the Budget Committee, our good friend John Yarmuth.
Thank you, Joe. We are at this point for one reason and one reason only, and that's the incompetence of the leadership of the Republican majority in the House and Senate and the incompetence of the leadership in the White House. If you think back to not just through this year, but even last year, we never had an operating budget for the first 7 months of the fiscal year. We finally got one for 5 months. So far this year, not only have we gone through 4 continuing resolutions, we didn't get a budget resolution at all until July, which was several months past when it is normally put forward. That was only to get reconciliation instructions. And now here we are, 4 months into this fiscal year with absolutely no spending plan for the remainder of the year. That is the only reason we are here, incompetent leadership from this Republican majority. We're not here because of CHIP, we're not here because of DACA, we're not here because of any other singular issue. What Republican incompetence has done is brought a much greater urgency to get those items dealt with because they were not dealt with under regular order. So once again, all of my colleagues here, I know will feel the same way. We are ready, willing, and able to try to help the Republican majority exercise their basic responsibility to govern this country. And if they would allow us in the room, we'd be happy to do that. Thank you. Oh yeah, I'm now pleased to introduce one of the members of the chairs of our Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, Sherry Bustos from Illinois.
Good morning, everyone. Washington Republicans like to talk about how government should be run as a business. Well, I can't think of any business who's successful who would be running things like the Republicans are today. It's exactly what Paul Ryan is doing to the military, to the VA, to community health centers, to the Children's Health Insurance Program for the past year has been this up and down emotion that he's putting folks through. So whether you're a doctor in a small clinic, whether you're a scientist in an ag lab like we have in Peoria, Illinois, whether you're a general commanding the troops, how can we expect any of these dedicated Americans to do their jobs when a Congress led by the Republicans is constantly threatening to pull this rug out from beneath them? But that's exactly what Speaker Ryan has been doing from one day to the next, from 1 month to the next. Since September, I was one of the Democrats who voted for each of those continuing resolutions, all 3 times that it's been presented. On this 4th time, I said enough is enough. And I really hoped that by giving Paul Ryan and the rest of the Republican leadership this extra time to do this, I really hoped that they would lead to bipartisan solutions for our country. But instead, what did they do? Right after the holidays, they decided to add another week to their vacation. And when it gets down to offering real solutions, we have the party in control saying they're not ready to offer any of those. It's Republicans leading the House, leading the Senate, and controlling the White House. And I know that when I go home and when I walk the supermarket aisles, in the bread aisle or the milk aisle or the cereal aisle, what I keep hearing is just get something done. They're fed up with Washington doing nothing to help them or their families. They're sick of these midnight deadlines, and they want bipartisan solutions right now. And you know what? We up here, we agree with that. We want bipartisan solutions as well. It's why last summer, we went to a small town in Virginia, and we, as Democrats, announced that we had a better deal to offer America. Better jobs, better wages, and a better future. And in order to offer those, the better deal that we need to offer is a bipartisan better deal. We know that governing from crisis to crisis hurts our economy, hurts our national security, hurts the hardworking families across America. So we are here, all of us, prepared to work through the night, work as hard as we possibly can work to come up with those bipartisan solutions. We're saying to Paul Ryan that we are willing to work together for the good of this country. That's the better deal that we want to offer. Thank you. And with that, I would like to introduce my colleague and our friend, Congressman Peter Welch.
Thank you, Sherry. There's 2 questions. 1, how did we get here? And 2, how do we find our way out of this? We got here because we're not passing budgets, and we've weaponized the budget process by having now the 4th continuing resolution in 4 months. If this were the city of Burlington in Vermont, the fire department couldn't enter into a contract to buy a piece of equipment. The police department couldn't hire personnel, a police officer, to be on the beat. That's got to end. We need a budget. The second issue is that the speaker's made a tactical decision, and that is to negotiate to get to 218 by working with the Freedom Caucus. It is always a dead end because it means the most extreme element is the one that makes the final decision. The speaker has another option, and it's to work with Democrats who want to turn the lights on and keep the lights on in government. And third, the priorities that the Democrats are talking about now are mainstream. A DACA, to be sure, the Dreamers, to be sure. But what we're looking for, money to help our first responders on the opioid crisis. They're on the front lines. Money for the VA to help our veterans. Disaster relief for victims of natural disasters. Funding for the community health centers in CHIP. These are not Democratic provisions. These are bipartisan provisions. And by the way, the other one is we want pension stability. We want to get a reform system for those folks whose pensions are in jeopardy, most of whom, by the way, voted for President Trump. We want to help those folks. We're ready to do it. We want the lights on. And our next speaker is Congressman Aguilar. Pete, where are you? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Americans have every right to feel frustrated by their government today. Republicans in Washington control all 3 branches of government and are refusing to consider any bipartisan proposal or compromise that will keep government open. Democrats have made it clear that if you need our votes, the budget and what we move forward must reflect our values and invest in our priorities, like funding children's health insurance and community health centers, disaster response, opioid response, and a solution for our dreamers. The decision by Republican leadership to ignore calls for a bipartisan solution like the USA Act that I'm a co-sponsor of and allow for a government shutdown is irresponsible. The USA Act I introduced with Representative Will Hurd is a bipartisan fix for dreamers that includes strong border security. The bill is a product of months of hard work, with both sides compromising and coming together to solve this problem to allow dreamers to stay in the only country that they know is home. Congress should act now and should pass these items to fund government. I'll stay in Washington with my colleagues to work together with Republicans and Democrats to reopen the government, solve this issue, and address the pressing remaining issues that we need to do. And with that, I'd like to introduce the Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus, Representative Linda Sanchez from California.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you to my colleagues who are here. From day one, Donald Trump and Republicans have chosen a go-it-alone approach. On day 365, that strategy has once again blown up in their face. I can't imagine a greater embarrassment to President Art of the Deal than the fact that the government controlled entirely by his own party has shut down. And now their strategy has led them to a government shutdown that they want to blame the Democrats for. But it is their inability to govern and lead this country. I think the American people are smart enough to realize who takes the blame. Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, and they serve in the White House. This is a Trump shutdown through and through. They need to give up on their drive to divide our country. They need to get serious about addressing the challenges that our country is facing. In the last 365 days, Republicans have neglected children's health insurance, community health centers, veterans, our military, those facing a pension crisis, and hardworking Americans who struggle to get by day. 3 months ago, they let the Children's Health Program expire. 4 months ago, they eliminated protections for dreamers. They have ignored the opioid epidemic and the workers' pension crisis. Democrats will not allow them to take kids and working families as political hostages. It is the most cynical form of governance that I have ever witnessed. So Democrats are ready. We've been waiting patiently, and we've been waiting a long time to work with Republicans to finish the work that the American people have sent us here to do. Now it is up to the Republicans to open the door and let us in. They have proven time and time again that they cannot do it alone. They have proven that they are incapable of the most basic functions of government, such as keeping the lights on. If Republicans can't even manage to keep the lights on, how can we trust them to meet the many challenges that our country faces? Americans deserve better, and Americans should demand better. And with that, I will invite the leader and the whip here to open it up for questions.
Jim? We'll open to questions.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is offering a CR through February 8th and said he will do that in exchange for putting the Graham-Durbin bill on the floor for open debate, as well as any other proposals senators come up with. Is that, in your guys' mind, an acceptable path forward?
Now you understand we're going into the fifth continuing resolution. Again, incompetence resolution. I have said, and I say it again, that we are willing to go to a short-term CR if, in fact, we have come to a conclusion and agreement on the parity, which is important to us, the investments, whether it's domestic or defense. We come to agreement on an outline for DACA and border security. If we have those agreements, now it won't be all spelled out because we're not writing appropriations bills, but we're saying these are the terms under which we will task the Appropriations Committee to write the bills. Then there's reason to have a CR. Otherwise, we could have innumerable CRs. These could go on forever. This one happens to have expired last night. And the first minute after midnight was the first anniversary of President Trump's first year in office. He promised infrastructure. He gave us a train wreck. He promised to love the dreamers from his heart, and we would be able to work together in a bipartisan way, and he always seems to be pushed back from it. So he said what this country needs, a good shutdown. We don't agree. What he said of President Obama when we didn't control the Congress and he controls the White House, the Senate, and the House, what he said of President Obama, who didn't control the Congress, it starts at the top. Well, exactly what he said. The problems start from the top and have to get solved from the top. The president is the leader, and he's got to get everyone in a room, and he's got to lead. President Trump. And now, 1 year anniversary, a big, fat failure F for that first year. So it's no use having another CR unless we have the terms of engagement on how we go forward on the pay-fors, on the parity, on the pay-fors, on the pensions, on the DACA, and on the border security.
But Ms. Pelosi, but isn't it better to have the government open while you negotiate these matters on the side,
Stand.
have a CR for a few weeks in order to
This is the
why
fifth
is it
one.
better to
This
do
is the fifth one. And the Secretary of the Navy has said, what was his comment? He says Secretary Mattis said, it just creates unpredictability. It makes us rigid. We cannot deal with new and revealing threats. We know our enemies are not standing still, so it's about as unwise as it can be. The Secretary of the Navy had similar words to say about this. This is no way to have a government. It's not only about defense, it's about transportation, it's about education, it's about all of our meeting the needs of the American people. And the crux of the matter is the Republicans do not want to invest in a domestic agenda, and they're using the kids as an excuse. They use the children of CHIP as an excuse. They're using the children of the Dreamers as an excuse not to address the fiscal discussion that we must have. Mr. Hoyer? Or Mr. You want to
Well,
address that?
let me just say this. We do not want a shutdown. And we have made that clear all along the way. Now, if we are going to have negotiations while our government runs, the question is, who are we open to serve? Are we open to serve the veterans? I don't know how many of my colleagues got VA hospitals in our district. I've got two. The William Jennings Bryan Hospital Veterans Center in Columbia is named after one of our former colleagues, former member of this body, Ralph S. Johnson, down in Charleston, South Carolina, named after a young African-American who threw himself on a hand grenade so that he could save all the people around him. These people have made significant sacrifices, and yet we are not funding the program that they need to live out their golden years in dignity and respect. We are saying, let's address these issues. The children, not just the Children's Health Insurance Program, but the fact of the matter is they're refusing to fund these disproportionate share hospitals, basically rural in my district, where these children have to go to get their care, refusing to fund community health centers, refusing to fund properly teaching hospitals, all of which we are here to say, let's not continue to lurch from one CR to the next. Let's lay out a smooth trajectory so that our military can plan, so that our veterans can live out their lives in dignity, so our children will have places to go to get health care. That's what we would like to see, and that's what we're standing here for.
Let me just say what I said about having this NACR that would go forward. We could do it in an hour. There's no new information. That we can do this in an hour. We can establish this if they wanted to do it. And we have stood ready to cooperate and yield on many scores in order to get that done. Our distinguished ranking member on the Appropriations Committee, Nita Lowey, is here, and so many other members who are with us here or helping to work on these issues or getting ready for the march. They stand here ready to work, with sleeves rolled up, ready to work. We could get these provisions in a continuing resolution right now. Otherwise, we're just becoming accomplices to their incompetence, and we cannot do that for the American people. The buck stops here. Happy anniversary, Mr. President. Your wish came true. You wanted to shut down the Trump shutdown is all yours. Yes, sir.
Leader, how far and how long are you willing to go? And at the stroke of midnight, the White House released a statement saying the Democrats were behaving like, quote, obstructionists, losers, not legislators. So are you the face of this shutdown?
Oh, please. Oh, please. Please. Anybody else with the Republican talking points? Go ahead.
No American ought to be confused. Consistently, the strategy of the Republican Party has been to take America hostage and shut down the government. They did it under Gingrich. They did it 3 years ago for 16 days. And they are pursuing that policy now. This is a shutdown that President Trump welcomed, which is why he would not allow, and McConnell would not, nor would Ryan, put on the floor issues on which we have consensus.
Absolutely.
Speaker Ryan said this: "We will advance major legislation one issue at a time." And then he said, "We will not duck the tough issues. We will take them head on." His failure to do either of those has realized the president's objective of shutting down this government. The answer to your question is absolutely. None of us here have ever supported policies to shut down the government. What we have supported, however, are positive policies to serve the American people. And we have not spent a minute putting on the floor an agreed upon by Paul Ryan over the last 4 years of parity of increases in domestic spending and military spending, both of which we support, both of which Speaker Ryan supported in 14, 15, 16, and 17. Why doesn't he agree on that now? I don't know the answer to that, but it has inevitably led to the fact that this incompetent leadership has not sent one appropriation bill to the President of the United States. This is not just about a CR. What is a CR? Funding government. No business, no enterprise, no office can function 30 days to 30 days to 30 days to 30 days without extraordinarily inefficiencies and losing money. I don't have the Secretary of Navy's quote, but apparently it's a $4 billion cost on these CRs.
Burning it up, just burning it
So we ask our Republican colleagues, do what Speaker Ryan said. Do what, frankly, President Trump said. When they talk about illegal immigrants, the only reason they're illegal is because Donald Trump made them so. Donald Trump made them so. And what did he say? He said, Congress, fix it, and I'll sign it. What did he say yesterday to Leader Schumer? Come down to the White House and let's work it out. And Senator Schumer went down to the White House and he thought it was worked out. But somebody in the White House, maybe it was himself warring with himself, but maybe it was some other staffer said, no, we don't want to make a deal because what you wanted, Mr. President, was a shutdown and show 'em. Let's be responsible.
Maybe it was Mr. Mulvaney. I don't know if you saw this, but in an interview, speaking with Sean Hannity, the OMB director, Mick Mulvaney, said, I quote, "I found out for the first time last night that the person who technically shuts down the government is me, which is kind of cool." So this is how playful they are, and I think that the president thinks this is some kind of novelty. Yes.
So, kind of going back to the question before, you say that it's not just about DACA, yet we're talking about this issue again. How far are you willing to go? I think that's what we really want to know. How far are you willing to go into the shutdown to get your demands met
And are you willing to give up an agreement on DACA? Because it sounds like Republican leadership
No,
doesn't go there.
may I respectfully disagree with your characterization and not stipulate to any presentation of fact that you may legitimately believe. Our issue, if there never were one DACA, one dreamer in the world, we still have a discussion about the investments, the money side. This is about the money side. Mr. Welsh talked about the priorities we had put forth. He has that in a letter to the president, which overwhelmingly the members of Congress have talked about. It's about opioids. It's about veterans' needs. It's about pensions. It's about National Institutes of Health. It's about disaster assistance. It's about CHIP. So this is a discussion about the budget. It also happens to be a discussion about the Dreamers, because it is a vehicle leaving the station. If they want to have a separate vote, we're happy to have that. But it is what this is about. So again, if there never were a Dreamer, now my view and what I see is fear in their eyes of their own caucus, because their own caucus doesn't want to, as Mr. Hoyer pointed out, have the parity in terms of domestic increases as we have defense increases. So that, I mean, it's not as, easy as just talking about DACA, because this is intensely the green eye shade conversation that we're having. They're using the Dreamers as an excuse not to invest in our domestic agenda. Absolutely. And what have we proposed? We said we want to work with you. If you want to increase defense spending, parity means you have to increase domestic. And in doing so, our proposals are strictly bipartisan. We're not coming up with anything that wouldn't get an overwhelming vote on the floor of the House. The opioid epidemic, again, veterans and meeting their needs, NIH, CHIP, disaster assistance, pensions, did I say that again? So these are nonpartisan issues. They're bipartisan issues. But the issue is, will they invest in the domestic agenda? That is the heart of the matter. And that is the reason they're using DACA as an excuse. They're using the kids as an excuse. They're using CHIP as an excuse. And let me just tell you this. When I was Speaker and we had a Democratic president, we had an opportunity to send a CHIP bill to the White House. It was one of the first bills we passed. Lilly Ledbetter and the CHIP bill passed in both houses. And I just want you to know that when we took that vote in February 2009, 144 Republicans voted against CHIP. Among them, Ryan of Wisconsin, Scalise of Louisiana, McCarthy of California, McMorris Rogers of Washington State, the Republican leadership in the Congress. And many of these members who go to the floor and talk about how they're madly in love with CHIP, they voted against it. 144 Republicans voted against CHIP at that time. So now, all of a sudden, and that was a fully inclusive CHIP. Now they're doing, first they had one that had children paying for children's health. We had to reject that. Now they're using it as a shield for their incompetence. And they're using the Dreamers as a shield for their incompetence. Children, just think of C words. Children, courage, lack thereof. Competence, lack thereof. Consistency, lack thereof. So if you want to cover this, cover the background. This would be the fifth CR, and as Mr. Hoyer points out all the time, this is the fifth Republican shutdown since 1990. We believe in governance. We don't believe in shutdowns. And this is the course they're taking. But it's a good debate. I mean, I thank you for your question, because it gives us a chance to pull back the shades and say, no, this isn't about that. If there never was a dreamer, there never were a dreamer on the face of the earth, we still have this budget debate about what our values are. And if they care about CHIP, why did they exhaust themselves of everything in their being, whether it's votes, time, legislative interest, to pass a tax bill, and then say, well, we can't pass a CHIP?
We could pass CHIP by 12:30 today.
Let me ask you, Leader Pelosi. Last question. You talking about in the past, the negotiations didn't shut down may have helped contribute to a previous speaker being run out of the building. Do you think that Paul Ryan risks losing his gavel should he negotiate to reopen the government? And what would your advice as a former speaker to him be on trying to overcome maybe some of those hurdles?
Let me just say this. I think that's a question better directed to the Republican caucus. Right now, what we're focusing on is we proposed something that we thought they would accept because it was bipartisan, and we worked hard to keep it that way. We wrote to the president to make sure that he was aware of that. The Republicans know full well that we're ready to do that. The fear that I see in their eyes is of their own caucus who do not want to invest in the domestic agenda. And why? Because they fear it will increase the deficit, which they already borrowed from our children's future. $1.5 trillion will be over $2 trillion with interest in order to give tax breaks to the top 1% in our country and corporate America. That's what their priority is. That's why they're weak on this in terms of how we write a budget. So you have to direct that question to
Peter?
the Republicans.
You know, I just want to say, because that's the heart of the question, Paul Ryan has a very simple decision. Country first, party first. The demands we want are not demands. They're common commitments to the folks who need their pensions, to the first responders with opioids, to the community health centers and the children's health insurance programs and so on. And Paul Ryan's made a decision to go with the Tea Party, to go with the Freedom Caucus, and to give the back of his hand to folks who are willing to work with him. He's got to cut them loose and set the country free.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.